The world is holding its breath. As silence hovers between nations and leaders calculate their next words, there's a growing tension and anticipation unlike anything we've seen in recent years. After two shocking and strategically sharp military responses, Iran is no longer just reacting. It's rewriting the rules of the game. Now, whispers of a third strike are beginning to surface, and with them, a chilling realization is spreading across the globe. This isn't just about retaliation anymore. This is about dominance, defiance, and a clear message to the world that Iran is not backing down. For decades, the narrative was fixed. Iran was portrayed as the underdog, always cornered by sanctions, isolated by politics, and restrained by international pressures. But something has changed. The last two strikes did not just target physical structures or defense systems. They struck deeply into the pride and confidence of a military power long believed to be untouchable. And perhaps even more significantly, they exposed the silence of the international community. The world watched. The world waited. But the world did not stop it. That silence is louder than any condemnation. It is the sound of fear, of recalibration, and perhaps even of resignation. Now, the idea of a third strike looms, and it's not being treated as speculation, it's being treated as a storm gathering strength. Military analysts, political leaders, and global media outlets are shifting their tone. The question is no longer if, but when. And beyond that, what happens next? Iran's military capability is not just in its missiles or drones, but in its strategy, patience, and understanding of global psychology. Each move seems designed not just to hit, but to haunt. What makes this moment different from every previous flare-up in the Middle East is the level of control Iran appears to hold. It is no longer just reacting to provocation. It is choosing when, where, and how to respond, and doing so with an awareness that every action is shaping a new geopolitical order. The world is watching a nation once seen as a regional actor step into a global spotlight, not as a victim, but as a force. As leaders in the West weigh their words carefully and regional alliances grow nervous, there is one truth emerging that cannot be ignored. If Iran delivers a third strike, and if it lands with the same precision and impact as the first two, the aftershocks will not be contained to one nation. They will echo through the halls of power in Washington, London, Brussels, and beyond. This is not just a military operation, it is a declaration that the balance of power is shifting and the usual rules no longer apply. Iran's actions are no longer just surprising, they're strategic. No longer just bold, they're calculated. And perhaps most unsettling for those who once held control, no longer isolated, but increasingly respected and feared by both allies and adversaries. If this third strike comes, and all signs suggest it will, it may go down in history as the moment the world finally understood that Iran is not merely surviving pressure, it is thriving under it. The silence after the first strikes was deafening, but what follows the third may be even louder, not in words, but in consequences. Iran's strategy is no longer reactive, it is assertive and deliberate. The first two strikes signaled a new phase in geopolitical confrontation, but what's unfolding now points to something deeper. Iran is setting the tone, not just answering back. For decades, the image of Iran was one shaped by external powers, sanctioned, restricted, isolated. But today, that image is being dismantled, not with speeches or negotiations, but with precise, strategic military actions that have caught the world's attention. Iran's third strike is expected to be not just another military move, It is expected to be a message not only to Israel, but to the entire Western Bloc, that the era of unilateral domination is cracking. What's critical to understand is that Iran is not acting blindly. Each decision appears to be measured. Each attack is not just physical, it's psychological. With each missile, drone, or operation, Iran is building a narrative, one of resistance, capability, and above all, control. In traditional warfare, the stronger nation imposes the terms. But Iran, despite decades of pressure, has flipped this concept. It is now Iran that sets the timeline. It is Iran that decides when a response will come, how it will look, and what shockwaves it will send across the globe. And those watching, be it intelligence agencies or world governments, have started to acknowledge this shift, even if silently. This third strike, if executed, will most likely serve multiple purposes, not just to cause military damage, but to make a strategic point. Iran is no longer responding to the game. It is rewriting the game. This is not a story of offense and defense anymore. It is a story of narrative warfare. Iran has realized that striking once is an attack, but striking thrice with precision and confidence is a message. The psychological impact of back-to-back successful operations is reshaping the power equations in the region. Even those who may not support Iran politically are beginning to recognize that it cannot be dismissed as a passive player. It has entered a new role, not just a country that resists, but one that initiates. And that, for many in the West, is the most unsettling change of all. What comes next might not just shock the world, it might redefine it. One of the most powerful elements of Iran's recent military actions is the global silence that follows. After the first and second strikes, there was no overwhelming response from world powers, no immediate retaliation, no strong condemnations with real consequences. And that silence is more telling than any headline. It reveals something significant. The world is hesitant, uncertain, and perhaps even afraid. The usual loud voices that would call for sanctions, mobilizations, or military threats have been unusually quiet. Why? Because Iran's response was not reckless. It was calculated, organized, and disciplined. It didn't provoke chaos. It revealed vulnerability. That is what made the silence louder than any scream. This silence has turned into a new kind of global tension. Countries that were once united in their stance against Iran are now reconsidering their positions. Some are confused, others are cautious, and a few are even beginning to quietly respect the strategic intelligence behind Iran's actions. It is no longer easy to paint Iran as the reckless aggressor when its military strikes are precise and its political language remains composed. While the mainstream media may avoid giving too much credit, behind closed doors, diplomatic circles are in a state of recalculation. That is what makes this silence dangerous. It signals the reshuffling of global alliances and the possible breakdown of long-standing narratives. In many ways, this silence reflects fear of escalation. The world has seen that Iran is not bluffing. They have the capability, the will, and the strategic patience to strike hard and stay calm afterward. Unlike emotional or erratic responses, Iran's measured tone after each strike sends a chilling message. We are ready. Are you? And that readiness has put the world on edge. Leaders know that the wrong move could trigger something massive, and so they remain quiet, watching, analyzing, delaying. This kind of silence, especially from powerful nations, is not normal. It only happens when something changes. And Iran has changed the board. With its third strike possibly on the way, this silence will not remain still. It will either explode into a new phase of conflict or evolve into a hesitant form of respect. Either way, the silence following Iran's moves is not weakness. It is the sound of a world uncertain of how to deal with a new kind of power. Iran's strategy is not just military, it's psychological. With each strike, Iran isn't only damaging infrastructure, it is challenging the very confidence of its adversaries. The third strike, if it comes, won't just be about missiles or drones. It will be about fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what Iran is truly capable of. In modern warfare, psychological dominance can be more effective than battlefield victories. And Iran has mastered the art of unsettling its enemies before a single shot is fired. Every move they make is calculated to create uncertainty. Every delay, every speech, every warning carries a shadow behind it. What will Iran do next? This unpredictability is one of Iran's most dangerous tools. It forces its opponents to be on high alert constantly, draining resources and morale. Israel and its allies are not just dealing with physical threats, they're dealing with an opponent who doesn't follow the old rules. Iran doesn't telegraph its moves. It doesn't rush into reaction. It waits, it plans, and when it acts, it shocks. The first and second strikes were not spontaneous. They were rehearsed messages sent with precision. The third strike, if it happens, will follow the same path. Not chaos, but chess. Not noise, but meaning. Psychological warfare works not just through fear, but through confusion. Iran has introduced an element of chaos into the strategic thinking of its enemies. When a nation doesn't know when or where it will be struck, or even if it will be struck, it loses control. Leaders become reactive instead of proactive. Defense systems stay on at all times. The public grows anxious. The media spins narratives without facts, and all the while, Iran remains quiet, composed, and unbothered. That imbalance is not accidental. It is the real strike before the strike. Iran understands something that few nations do anymore. Real strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's calm. Sometimes it's unpredictable. And sometimes it's in the silence between actions. That's where Iran's psychological advantage lies. And as the world waits for what may come next, Iran's enemies are not just bracing for impact, they're trying to understand how to fight a country that already lives in their minds. Iran's influence today extends far beyond its borders, and that's exactly why it remains such a challenge to defeat. While many nations rely solely on their military might or economic power, Iran operates through a web of regional alliances, ideological loyalty, and strategic patience. Its reach flows through Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Not always through direct occupation, but through deep-rooted influence that cannot be undone by a single airstrike or invasion. Iran doesn't just build armies, it builds narratives. It doesn't just fund weapons, it cultivates loyalty. This is not the kind of enemy the West is used to dealing with. And that's why, despite all the sanctions and military pressure, Iran still stands strong. The West has long tried to isolate Iran through economic restrictions, diplomatic pressure, and threats of military action. But what they didn't anticipate was Iran's ability to adapt. Over the years, Iran has become a master of surviving under pressure. Instead of collapsing, it built alternatives. It turned to local industries, formed strong trade ties with China and Russia, and created systems that bypass traditional Western controls. Sanctions that would have crippled another country have only strengthened Iran's internal resolve. This resilience has baffled many in the West, who expected Iran to fold under pressure. Instead, it stood taller, proving that survival is no longer enough. It's about long-term strategic endurance. What makes Iran even more difficult to defeat is its ideological core. Unlike many governments driven solely by political power or wealth, Iran's leadership operates on a vision. Right or wrong, it's a belief system. And belief systems don't shatter easily. You can bomb a military base, but you can't bomb an idea. That's why Iran's supporters remain firm even when the country faces hardship. That's why its influence survives even outside its borders. Its people and allies see it not just as a country, but as a symbol of resistance, especially in a region that has seen constant foreign interference. This combination of strategic alliances, economic adaptability, and unwavering ideology makes Iran unique. It's not just a nation, it's a movement. And movements, unlike regimes or armies, are much harder to break. That's why the question isn't just about when or if Iran will strike next, but why, despite everything thrown at it, Iran has never truly been defeated. Every time Iran is pushed, it pulls back just enough to recalculate, but never retreats entirely. This ability to balance restraint with strength is one of the core reasons it remains unconquered. Iran doesn't jump into battles recklessly. It waits, watches, and then strikes in ways that carry a message far louder than any headline. This is what happened after the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani. The world expected chaos, perhaps even war, but Iran responded in a way that shocked everyone. It targeted U.S. military bases with precision, caused injuries, and yet avoided full-scale escalation. It was a strike not out of rage, but of calculation. A lesson in how deterrence works when wisdom leads the charge, not impulse. Iran's understanding of deterrence is deeply rooted in history. It knows that to keep enemies away, you don't need to destroy them, you need to convince them that the cost of fighting you will never be worth it. And time after time, Iran has done just that. It invests in defense systems that make any foreign strike look risky. It invests in long-range missiles that make distant enemies feel close. And most of all, it invests in patience. While Western powers change leaders, shift policies, and run in election cycles, Iran plays the long game. Its goals are measured not in years, but in generations. This endurance frustrates its enemies. They expected a country that would collapse after revolution, after war with Iraq, after sanctions, after international isolation. But Iran adapted, it tightened its core, strengthened internal unity when external pressure increased, and created a culture that sees resistance as honor. This is not the kind of population that folds under pressure. It's one that takes pride in standing tall, even when the world stands against it. The West, for all its power, is still learning how to deal with a nation that thrives on endurance and sees struggle as part of its identity. Iran doesn't just defend itself with weapons, it defends itself with resolve. It's not just protecting land, it's protecting an idea. And in every strike it chooses or refuses to make, Iran reminds the world that sometimes real power lies in not just how loudly you roar, but how long you last in silence, in patience, and in unshaken belief. Iran's strength doesn't lie only in its military or alliances. It lies in the mindset of its people. The reason the West can't defeat Iran is because Iran has a population that has grown up with the idea that resistance is a form of identity. They've endured war, sanctions, international isolation, and constant media demonization. Yet they have not broken. Instead, they've grown more united in defiance. When you have a nation where people are willing to sacrifice comfort for sovereignty, where students, shopkeepers, and soldiers alike believe in independence over submission, then that nation becomes nearly impossible to crush. It's not just about soldiers fighting on the front lines, it's about the millions at home who refuse to be psychologically defeated. Western powers often underestimate the power of collective memory. Iran hasn't forgotten the 1953 coup, the imposed wars, or the years of sanctions. These memories are part of the national psyche, and they've formed a strong barrier against foreign manipulation. Iranians see beyond the politics. They see patterns of interference and control that they've resisted for decades. Every attempt to destabilize Iran often results in the opposite effect, rallying the people around their leadership, regardless of their internal disagreements, because the alternative is seen as foreign domination. This mindset is Iran's silent weapon, and it's far more effective than any missile or tank. Iran's narrative, especially in the Middle East, also positions it not as a bully, but as a symbol of resistance. Whether it's standing up to Israel or rejecting U.S. military bases in the region, Iran's stance appeals to populations who feel exploited, colonized, or ignored by the West. This gives Iran soft power that no amount of sanctions can erase. Iran speaks the language of dignity and defiance in a region that has long craved both, and people listen. It's not about being perfect or politically correct. It's about being unafraid. When you face a nation that turns every loss into fuel, every threat into a lesson, and every blockade into an opportunity, you're not facing just a country, you're facing a philosophy. And that philosophy, rooted in resistance, faith, and patience, is why Iran continues to defy predictions, rewrite expectations, and remain undefeated in a world that thought it could be broken. In a world where empires rise and fall, where governments crumble under pressure, and where nations often bend to the will of the powerful, Iran stands as a living contradiction. It is not perfect. It has its internal struggles, debates, and divisions. But when it comes to facing external threats, Iran becomes one voice, one body, one will. Not because it wants war, but because it refuses chains. Iran has shown the world that true strength is not in nuclear weapons or trillion-dollar armies. It is in the hearts of a people who would rather suffer than surrender, who would rather endure than be enslaved. That is why sanctions didn't break them. That is why media campaigns didn't silence them. That is why political isolation didn't erase them. And that is why, try as they might, the West simply cannot defeat Iran. Because Iran is more than borders and flags. It is a spirit, a defiance that refuses to be tamed, a memory that never forgets, and a future that continues to rise, no matter how dark the night. If you felt something in your heart while watching this, if you saw the courage, the complexity, the calm in the storm that is Iran, then don't forget to share this message. Let the world hear the truth that mainstream headlines try to bury. Thank you for watching this video till the end. We don't just share stories, we share voices that deserve to be heard. If you stand for justice, dignity, and truth, then join us on this journey. Subscribe for more powerful stories, comment your thoughts below, and most of all, never stop seeking the truth. May peace, strength, and clarity be with you.